Theodore Roosevelt was an extremely influential man in the United States during the early 1900s. He represented and defended those things that cannot defend themselves, such as the meat consumers of America, nature preserves, and the American bison. The presidency of Theodore Roosevelt brought about change in the way Americans lived their lives, especially in regard to health and conservation. He instituted acts that made life healthier after the release of Upton Sinclair's book, The Jungle. He paved the way for conservation acts while instituting many of his own, and he protected the American bison from extinction. The release of Upton Sinclair's book, The Jungle, in 1906 introduced the horrors of the meatpacking industry to the United States. In 1904, Fred Warren asked Sinclair to write about immigrant workers and conditions in the meatpacking plants of Chicago. The conditions inside the factories were disgusting and purely unhealthy. The meat would be shoveled into carts, and the men who did the shoveling would not trouble to lift out a rat, even when he saw one. There were things that went into the sausage in comparison with which a poisoned rat was a tidbit. There was no place for the men to wash their hands before they ate their dinner, and so they made a practice of washing them in the water that was to be ladled with the sausage. Americans were outraged and disgusted by what they read. Sinclair said, "I aimed at the public's heart, and by accident I hit them in the stomach." Although Sinclair was a socialist, The Jungle reached nearly all of the U.S. and is the leading cause for the meatpacking and slaughterhouse reforms of the early 20th century. Theodore Roosevelt needed to fix the issues facing America's meatpacking plants and general health. The Jungle was brought to Roosevelt's attention, and the issues of the meatpacking plants and slaughterhouses of America were immediately introduced to the country's most powerful man. The utter disregard for a sanitary work environment and product became an important issue during Roosevelt's second term. 6 months after The Jungle was published, the Meat Inspection Act and the Pure Food and Drug Act were passed by Congress. The Meat Inspection Act, approved June 30, 1906, for the purpose of preventing the use in commerce of meat and meat food products which are adulterated, the Secretary shall cause to be made by inspectors appointed for that purpose an examination and inspection of all cattle, sheep, swine, goats, horses, mules, and other equines before they shall be allowed to enter into any slaughtering, packing, meat canning, rendering, or similar establishment in which they are to be slaughtered, and the meat and meat food products thereof are to be used in commerce, and all cattle, sheep, swine, goats, horses, mules, and other equines found on such inspection to show symptoms of the disease shall be set apart and slaughtered separately from all other cattle, sheep, swine, goats, horses, mules, and equines. And when so slaughtered, the carcasses of said cattle, sheep, swine, goats, horses, mules, and other equines shall be subject to careful examination and inspection, all as provided by the rules and regulations to be described by the Secretary, provided in the subchapter. The passing of this act provided workers with sanitary working conditions and consumers with sanitary meat. The Pure Food and Drug Act, approved June 30th, 1906, for preventing the manufacture, sale, or transportation of adulterated or misbranded or poisonous or deleterious foods, drugs, medicines, and liquors, and for regulating traffic therein, and for other purposes. These two major reforms for sanitary workplace, food, and drugs kept Americans healthy and eventually led to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. America's West was endangered, so President Roosevelt formed conservation acts to help protect the West. After both his mother and wife died on Valentine's Day of 1884, Roosevelt went west in search of refuge from tragedy and disappointment. The Badlands of South Dakota provided Roosevelt with peace and tranquility. Remembering a camping trip to Yosemite, Roosevelt said, "It was like lying in a great solemn cathedral, far vaster and more beautiful than any built by the hand of man." Here he realized that these beautiful lands as well as the wildlife were damaged. Roosevelt's continuous travels to the West's natural monuments brought him to the same disappointing conclusion. Gifford Pinchot, a forester, determined and argued that the natural resources of the West required scientific management to prevent their depletion by private developers. The need to preserve the beauty of the West as well as America's other natural beauties was evident. America's stunning landscapes needed Roosevelt's attention. Roosevelt took it upon himself to preserve America's natural beauties, and in doing so he placed approximately 230 million acres of land under public protection. Roosevelt is responsible for establishing the first 51 bird reserves, 4 game preserves, and 150 national forests. He also established the U.S. Forest Service, signed into law the creation of 5 national parks, and signed the 1906 Antiquities Act, under which he proclaimed 18 national monuments. Roosevelt added land to the Yosemite Park, and of the 5 national parks, Wind Cave National Park and Mesa Verde National Park was included. The U.S. Forest Service was established in 1905 by Roosevelt to control the federal land reserves. Roosevelt named Gifford Pinchot the first chief of the Forest Service, and his goal was to provide the greatest amount of good for the greatest amount of people in the long run. The 1906 Antiquities Act made it illegal to appropriate, excavate, injure, or destroy any historic or prehistoric ruin or monument, or any object of antiquity situated on lands owned or but controlled by the government of the United States without permission from the Secretary of the Department of the Government having jurisdiction over the lands on which said antiquities are situated. The Conservation President made it clear that the land protected by the U.S. government would be protected and preserved for years. Since the acts have been passed by Congress, they have been edited and have evolved to preserve the protected lands today and throughout time. The American bison was nearly extinct. The American buffalo bison roamed the western U.S. in fear of only natural predators, wolves, mountain lions, and grizzly bears, for centuries. The western expansion of the 1830s brought hunters with the use of firearms to the west, thus bringing an extreme threat to the existence of the buffalo. Between 1830 and 1880, buffalo were prime target of western hunters' guns. Large-scale buffalo hunts killed hundreds of buffalo per day. Many buffalo were killed only for their tongues, considered a delicacy. As many as 250 bison were shot in one day by one hunter. The decade of 1870 to 1880 brought an apex to the buffalo slaughter. 250,000 hides were auctioned off in less than 2 days. By the end of the 19th century, less than 300 wild bison remained. Near extinction, the buffalo were in dire need of help. Roosevelt's visits to the West made him realize the issue of buffalo destruction. With help from Roosevelt, we are still able to admire the American buffalo today. Roosevelt, realizing that the American buffalo struggled to survive, took critical steps to save the buffalo from extinction. With fewer than 300 wild buffalo remaining at the beginning of the 20th century, Roosevelt acted through his presidential power to save the buffalo by helping to create the American Bison Society, along with the National Bison Range in Montana. The American Bison Society, created on December 8, 1905, was led by William Hornaday, President, and Theodore Roosevelt, Honorary President. With the help of Roosevelt, numerous wildlife reserves were formed through Congress. Private bison owners were able to help the society as well as by stocking preserves and parks. The National Bison Range, established May 23, 1908, provided bison with protected space to live and multiply. In 1911, Hornaday declared that the bison were no longer in danger of extinction. Roosevelt's passion for wildlife kept the American bison from extinction and helped the species to make a powerful return. With as of 2002, more than 232,000 bison in the U.S. and 150,000 bison in Canada. Roosevelt's actions to preserve and protect America's people and the lands he has made him one of the most renowned presidents of the United States of America. Theodore Roosevelt's presidency saved Americans from awful working conditions and unhealthy meat, preserved America's beautiful natural lands for our people, their children, and their children's children forever, and rescued the American bison from extinction. In resolving these issues, as well as others, the Panama Canal included, Roosevelt has prevailed as one of the greatest presidents of the United States, dutifully earning his position upon Mount Rushmore, a national monument.